Okay, I'm going to briefly try to describe one of the ideas that has been developed in AMBIT, and we refer to it as the team around the worker. The team around the worker is a shift of emphasis, and I really want to emphasize that it is not an alternative to this idea of the team around the child or the team around the client. It's a complementary idea. So where the team around the child or the team around the client involves an array of different professionals bringing their different skills, here the focus is all on your professional role and your professional skills. To use an analogy in mountaineering, it's a little bit like this particular climber, how he or she places their ice axe, how they approach this particular part of the climb, the technical skills that they have that enable them to be the right person to be leading that part of the climb. Now, team around the worker takes a different line. Team around the worker places a trusted, what we would call a key worker, in the middle and arrays the professionals around that worker, so that the professionals, if you like, are trying to make sense of who in this network does the young person, the client, have trust in? Who does the client see as their key worker, the person that gets me, that really understands me? Where, in other words, is this word that we talk about in another video, epistemic trust? Where is the openness to learning from? And it's really here the emphasis is less on skills and roles and much more on relationships. And it's not that you want one or the other, you want both of them. It's a both and dilemma. So let's just look at this in an example that's fictional but is hopefully reasonably realistic. What I want to focus on here is that where mentalizing is both our therapeutic stance with the client, but it's also our kind of, if you like, cultural, collective kind of duty to look after the mentalizing of our colleague who is in that quite tricky situation of being the person that our client has identified as, you get me, you understand me. If that's you that the client is with, what I would argue is that is stressful, it's anxiety provoking and it's exciting, but it's very easy to lose your mentalizing in that situation unless you have people who know you and you trust to keep their eye on you. So if you like, it's about us attending to who's holding the rope and how we watch over our colleagues who are in these strict situations. So here's a fictionalized example. It's a map of a client. We've got some lines. A red line means this is a very poor relationship. A thin green line means there's some relationship. And a thick green line means this is a really strong, important relationship. And here you can see that the client has got a reasonably good relationship with a teacher at school and with their youth worker, both of whom are actually quite isolated from the professional network. But the person that they particularly would identify themselves as, that person really gets me, is their residential worker. Their worker spends a lot of time with them, they've hung out together, they know their work has seen them through the ups and the downs of their life, and they've got some real sense that this worker understands where I'm coming from. In other words, there's epistemic trust there. Whatever else that worker has in terms of skills, the skill of creating a relationship of trust has been put into play, and there it is. And if the network is intelligent, it starts to think, this person is in this situation the key worker, key in the mind of the client. And there may be a number of people in that network, if they recognize that could both help the key worker but also be helped by the key worker. It's a mutual relationship that previously was rather lacking. So let's take the youth offending worker. Through being helpful to the residential worker might start to talk about the youth offending worker to the client. Say, hey, I met this guy. he was really helpful to me. He helped me understand and make sense of why you get caught in these kinds of patterns. He gave me a couple of questionnaires that I thought were really interesting. Do you want to do them with me? They were kind of helpful. Through that kind of hearing about how helpful the youth offending worker was to the key worker could then maybe invite the youth offending worker to come and meet the young person or the client face to face. So it forms a more gentle introduction to a worker. And through that, the youth offending worker may begin to develop a relationship of trust. So at maybe a later point in the life of this network, it may be decided that actually at this point, the youth offending worker has now got elements of the key worker. The young person feels they connect with me, they get me, they understand me as I maybe go towards a court appearance or something. And just in the same way, a network that is intelligent, that is kind of mentalizing of each other, rather than getting too divided into roles and responsibilities and forgetting relationships, would lose sight of that fact at its peril. So here we're talking about a key worker not as an organizational role, but as, if you like, a relationship description. Who gets the young person? And just to kind of articulate this in terms of where does this fit in AMBIT? Well, it kind of fits all over our map, our wheel. But in particular, I would say this is about scaffolding existing relationships. That residential worker is an important person in the life of the young person, and for other parts of the network to support them is helpful in both directions. Equally, it's about key worker taking responsibility for integration. So the residential workers help towards the youth offending worker in creating a relationship, helps the network come together rather than fall apart. And finally, it's definitely about the key worker remaining well connected to their team, because although in that example some of these workers were in different agencies, these could be people within the same broad team, for instance in a residential care setting. So there are many elements where team around the worker expresses itself, but it's this idea of looking at networks both from the position of roles and responsibilities, but also from relationships. Thank you.